It's very important to seek out, to actively seek out and listen very carefully to negative feedback.
If you have a choice of a lower valuation with someone you really like, or a higher valuation with someone you have a question mark about, take the lower valuation. It was just from the standpoint of wanting to be part of the internet, and I figured if we could make enough money to just get by, that would be okay.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 to 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 to 9. This one's for my top 10.
Because we had the third launch failure in a row of our Falcon 1 vehicle at SpaceX. The Tesla financing round that we were raising fell apart because the economy was going to tailspin. And it's pretty hard to raise money for a startup car company, late 2008 when GM and Chrysler are busy going bankrupt. That was tough. And then Solar City had to deal with Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley had to renege on the deal because they themselves were running out of money. So it looked like all three companies were going to die. And I was also going through a divorce. So that was definitely a low point.
So it's 2008, you're going through a divorce, which like some, to borrow your word, douchebag bloggers are writing about to make even worse.
Right, yes, that's true. In addition to all that stuff happening, I was getting dumped on massively in the press.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like all three companies are going to fail. I mean, why do you keep going with all three? Like, I feel like even a lot of great entrepreneurs in that situation would have been like, I've already sunk everything I have in these companies, and I got to pick one. But you didn't. I mean, you kept doing all three. Why?
Yeah, that was a very tough call. At the end of 2008, that was probably one of the toughest calls I've had to make. Because I could either reserve capital for one company or the other. I mean, fortunately, Solar City didn't need a ton of capital, so they were okay. But between SpaceX and Tesla, it's sort of like if you've got two kids, and what do? Do you spend all your money to maximize the probability of success of one, or do you try to keep both alive? Fortunately, it worked.
It's very important to seek out, to actively seek out and listen very carefully to negative feedback. And this is something that people tend to avoid because it's painful.
Yeah.
But I think this is a very common mistake, is to not actively seek out and listen to negative feedback.
Where do you do that? Do you go into forums? Do you go into Twitter? Like, what are your areas where you go to look for feedback on, let's say, the Tesla?
Well, it's like everyone I talk to is, in fact, when friends get a product, I say, look, don't tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like.
Right.
And because otherwise your friend is not going to tell you what he doesn't like.
Right.
He's going to say, oh, I love this and that, and then leave out the this is the stuff I don't like list, because he wants to be your friend, it doesn't want to offend you. So you really need to sort of coax negative feedback, and you know that if somebody is your friend, or at least not your enemy, and they're giving you negative feedback, then they may be wrong, but it's coming from a good place. And sometimes even your enemies give you good negative feedback.
I started the first internet company, Zip2, with my brother and another person, Greg Curry. It wasn't really with the thought of being wealthy. I've got nothing against being wealthy, but
we'll get back to that later too.
but it was just from the standpoint of wanting to be part of the internet, and I figured if we could make enough money to just get by, that would be okay. And when we started off, we literally only had like one computer, and so it would be our web server during the day, and I'd code at night. And we just got a small office in Palo Alto back when rent was not insane, and it cost us like $450 a month. It was cheaper than an apartment, so we actually just slept in the office and then showered at the YMCA on Page Mill, El Camino. So we'd walk over there and shower, and that was Actually, I think that was when I first met you, by the way. So I don't know if how many people, probably not many people know this, but we actually pitched Steve in like January '96 on the Zip2 business plan. And actually, I thought Steve was actually one of the most up to speed on what actually was in our business plan. Most of the people we met did not actually read our business plan. In fact, a lot of venture capitalists we met at the time didn't even know what the internet was. They'd never used it. And they didn't think
I'm
it would
not sure
amount
if we
to
still
anything.
do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm talking like, sort of well-known people on Sand Hill. It was like, wow, okay. But at the time, nobody had made any money on the internet, so I guess that's, then it wasn't really clear evidence that there was a business.
When I was a kid, I didn't really have any grand designs. I mean, the reason I started programming computers was because I like computer games. And I'd play lots of computer games, and I learned that if I wrote software and sold it, then I could get more money and buy better computers. So it wasn't really, with some grand vision or anything. When I was growing up, I'd read lots of books, and they were very often set in the United States, and it seemed like a lot of new technology was being developed in the United States. So I thought, okay, I really want to work on new technology, so I want to get to Silicon Valley. When I was growing up, Silicon Valley seemed like some sort of mythical place, like Mount Olympus or something. I think one thing that's important is if you have a choice of a lower valuation with someone you really like, or a higher valuation with someone you have a question mark about, take the lower valuation. It's better to have a higher quality venture capitalist who you think would be great to work with than to get a higher valuation with someone where there's even a question mark, really. I think that's important. It's sort of like getting married.
Is the secret to your success to be the CEO of two companies at the same time?
No. I think it's...
Because look at the correlation.
Yeah.
Struggling companies, everything's in the craft can in December 2008, so let's take on a new CEO gig. And same for Steve, coming back to Apple. Right?
No, definitely it was not my intention to be CEO of two companies. There's certain things that I kind of wanted to... I thought were important to happen, and I thought it was important that there was that an electric vehicle happened, that there was a success in the electric vehicle arena, because the incumbent companies were convinced that it was not possible to create an electric car that looked good, had a good range performance, and so forth, and that even if you did make such a car, it would not sell, because people had this love of gasoline, so we had to show that it was possible to create a compelling electric car, long range, good looking, all those things. That was a Tesla Roadster. And if you if you made such a thing, people would buy it. Certainly was quite, I was very, very bookish. I was reading all the time. So I was either reading, working on my computer, reading comics, playing Dungeons & Dragons, that kind of thing.
And I understand Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that wonderful book by Douglas Adams. That was a key book for you. What was it about that book that fired your imagination?
So I guess when I was in around 12 or 13, I had kind of an existential crisis, and I was reading various books on trying to figure out the meaning of life, and what does it all mean? Because it starts seeming quite meaningless, and then we happen to have some books by Nietzsche and Schopenhauer in the house, which you should not read at age 14. It's bad. It's really negative. But then I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was quite positive, I think, and it sort of highlighted an important point, which is that a lot of times the question is harder than the answer, and if you can properly phrase the question, then the answer is the easy part. And so, if to the degree that we can better understand the universe, then we better know what questions to ask, and then whatever the question is that most approximates what's the meaning of life, that's the question we could ultimately get closer to understanding. And so I thought, well, to the degree that we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness and knowledge, human knowledge, then that would be a good thing. Well, we've got a lot of work to do because we've got a lot of service centers and charge stations to construct. So mostly it's like we're trying to build our service and charge infrastructure as fast as possible. And I know this, like some of the customers who have ordered a car, they're not in the major cities, so they're a little unhappy with us because we are delaying delivery of their car. In fact, I'm going to apologize to some of them personally and explain the reason we are delaying delivery is because we really want them to have a good experience. But if they're too far from a service center and the charging is not sorted out, then they will not have a good experience. So we're going to delay the cars just for a few months to make sure that they have a good experience.
It's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it's like what other people are doing.
Me Too type ideas.
Yeah, slight iterations on a theme, and it's because it's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But by first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world, and what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths and say, okay, what are we sure is true, or as sure as possible is true? And then reason up from there. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on that you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, in fact, people do, that battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing.
Right.
Just notice that the stereo goes to 11
right.
on the Tesla. This is a Spinal Tap reference for those who know that this one goes to 11. We need just one more.
It's louder than loud.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. But no one seems to have noticed the product lineup. So you got the Model S, you got the Model X.
Oh, yeah.
You've just trademarked the Model E.
Yeah.
No one's said anything.
You got to
and the Model
add
and the Model Y.
Yeah.
Now, what's behind this?
I know, exactly. Well, I guess there's not a lot of humor in trademark law, because obviously we just trademarked sexy. And then we're having this discussion with Ford because the Ford's council they also didn't get it because they're sort of slightly opposing us using Model E. And then they saw that we registered Model Y, and they said, "Oh, you're planning to use Model Y instead of Model E?" Like, no, it was just a joke.
We don't do that.
Like, what is this?
Top 10.